Mabel, what if I told you that Trump's mass firings of federal agencies will lead to increased immigration, having to wait longer to get your packages in the mail, and not being able to camp at your favorite national park?
Well, Ren, I'd say I believe you because we wrote the piece together.
Oh, right. Well, it's still shocking. And so far, Doge has cut more than 100,000 workers and frozen or canceled thousands of programs and contracts, despite dozens of lawsuits challenging the legality of these moves.
Right, we've all heard how these massive cuts leave us less prepared and protected as a country, but there are some lesser known impacts that we discovered through our research and interviews with federal workers that you probably haven't heard of.
First up, the CIA fired an unspecified number of officers last week, and earlier this month, the CIA sent the White House what's being called an extraordinarily unusual email over an unclassified email server that listed all their new hires, including officers preparing to go undercover.
Which literally blows my mind. Apparently firing CIA agents is always a security risk because of all the knowledge they have of sensitive programs. But what makes this situation a national security risk is that this email included first initials and last names. So obviously these agents' identities are compromised now and can be leaked to foreign adversaries.
Well, one of the most notable chops that Trump has made is to USAID. So we spoke to Adam Dubard, who was on the USAID public engagement team until he was fired in the layoffs last month. And you might recognize him from his interview with 60 Minutes.
For the first 2 months, it was more like a month really, of the Trump administration, my main role for the few weeks before I was laid off was finding the words gender, inclusive, equity, and either removing them myself from external documents or flagging them for people to remove from internal and external facing documents. Would highlight, schools in Guatemala, health programs for women and children in Mozambique. But these were issued things that apparently they wanted to get rid of.
Can you tell us how and when you found out that you were fired?
It was a pretty bizarre process. So people were prepared, to have cuts to certain things like climate change, gender support, DEI, woke. People were prepared to obviously have different priorities. That's what happens when a new administration comes in. They said this is, it happens every 48 years.
Yeah.
But then, I started hearing rumors, Doge employees were in the building. Several of my coworkers met them. They're all very young, as we've all heard through the reporting. And then I think this was the last weekend of January. Friday, I worked from home as usual, although we were preparing to come back into work at the office 5 days a week. I received a text from a friend saying you should check to see if you can log into your email account on your work laptop. Was locked out of my work laptop, and I couldn't do anything. And then 3 days later, just an email announcing that you've been laid off.
That is so crazy, and that's so backwards that you would find out through trying to log in. Shocking. What were you thinking at the time?
There was no severance. And like I said, really no warning. People who've been admin leave have still been receiving pay. They still have their health insurance. I lost all that pretty much. Any contractor has pretty much lost that. But, speaking of efficiency or saving money, our intern is still getting paid to do nothing. People are still getting paid to do nothing. I had my government laptop and government badge for about 3 weeks until I was able to turn them in. I still had stuff at my desk that I couldn't access, like pictures of me and my wife, postcards, things that a jacket at my desk. Anything you hear about efficiency, it's just a straight up lie. These people don't know what they're doing. They're running around with a chainsaw. I guess they really are learning with a chainsaw, but they're just stripping the place for wires. It's a fire sale.
I mean, you brought up a good point that every 4 to 8 years you see a difference in priority through administrations. So then why do you think you were targeted in these firings? Why were people fired rather than, put upon different work?
I mean, that's a good question. I really don't know. I think we can get into Elon Musk. I don't know. It's hard to tell where the stupidity ends and the malice begins with Elon Musk and these people involved with Doge. I don't have a high opinion of him. I think someone got in his ear and told him that USAID was, some money laundering operation. Well, I will be clear, USAID wasn't perfect. I had, from the left, there's plenty of critiques of it as well. Are we making countries dependent upon, U.S. foreign aid? There are absolutely conversations to be had about that. And I think there absolutely were reforms that could have been made, but that's not what happened. It's not just, giving money away for free to some school in, Latin America or Africa. And I think that also helps, improve American influence and American national security. But also, I think it was doing good in the U.S. We partner with universities, helping like there's universities in South Carolina that are going to their entire programs are going to lose funding now. You notice Department of Defense has not been cut at all. ICE hasn't been cut. I don't think the police departments have been cut yet. Healthcare, education, foreign aid, all these things, diplomacy are being cut, but nothing militarized is. So I think you need to look, are Elon's contracts going to be cut? There's been all these lies about transgender operas in Colombia or, gay, theaters in Ireland. But these people don't know how to read a spreadsheet. First off, the numbers are all wrong. Second off, State Department was mostly funding these, not USAID. And third off, they never really went into what these initiatives were. The play in Colombia was like an international award-winning play, which maybe we shouldn't be funding that. I don't know, but I think to just say it's portrayed as some high school play getting thousands of US dollars is not really accurate. It's not efficient at all. It's inefficient. It's dangerous. People are going to die because of this. We can talk about me being laid off, but I've seen estimates that millions of people will die over the coming years through lack of access to vaccines. There's food rotting in ports that we've already paid for.
And we've already discussed on this show how Trump's cuts to USAID have halted food supply chains that millions of people in desperate need rely on. But in recent weeks, the true gravity of these foreign aid cuts have become more clear.
Yeah, like there have been interruptions in emergency healthcare delivery. And we know you've all heard all of this on the news, and they sound like such big picture concepts, but they affect real people. So to zoom in, a 17-year-old Bangladeshi girl, Kajal, contracted tuberculosis in January, and USAID is literally what has kept her alive. She's the sole breadwinner in her family, so she's the only one that can work, but after these recent cuts, her treatment came to an abrupt end. And tuberculosis is fatal if left untreated, so her chances of survival are slim to none.
Ugh, it's so awful. It's also interrupted things you wouldn't necessarily think of, like UNICEF refugee camps have run out of soap, which is, of course, vital to health and sanitation. And critically important HIV prevention programs in Africa have stopped, which has already resulted in children dying, and 1.6 million deaths are estimated by the end of the year just by cutting this one program.
I thought Elon said that nobody would die from any of these cuts.
Well, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said last week that 83% of USAID programs had been canceled, which is over 5,000 of them. And the Trump administration is giving USAID staffers who are abroad until April 6th to move back to the United States if they want to do so on the government's tab.
And it's just honestly such a shame because the Trump administration is cutting all of these programs, saying USAID is wasteful, but cutting these programs is wasteful. So Congress has allocated $60 billion to foreign assistance funding, and that money cannot be spent on anything else. Trump can definitely decide which contracts to pursue, but just abruptly ending medical treatments or letting food that was already exported rot when there's money for it. Like, I don't know. I'm curious to see what they actually use the budget for.
Another department cut that will have a lot of ramifications is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. So far, 900 NOAA employees have been let go, and they plan to cut 1,000 more.
Which is a lot because NOAA already has a really stretched workforce of only 13,000 employees. They're the ones that supply the data for like your smartphone weather apps and oversees the entire National Weather Service.
Well, experts say these cuts will affect every single American because NOAA is the backbone for virtually all of the basic weather information that's needed to produce global weather forecasts. So airlines need these forecasts to safely guide their planes, and retailers use them to schedule deliveries for customers.
I mean, without this data that you clearly can't get anywhere else, people won't be prepared for tornadoes and storms and wildfires. And this is obviously especially problematic because of everything going on with climate change.
Oh yeah, I mean, last year alone, the US experienced 27 weather or climate disaster events, and each one had losses exceeding $1 billion.
And it's pretty surprising that NOAA was targeted in all of these federal firings. Like, we were all prepared for more partisan and political agencies to be targeted, but the Weather Service? And if this was in the name of like cutting waste and spending, NOAA's annual budget is just 0.097% of 2024's fiscal spending. So not really sure what the rationale for these cuts are.
So not even 1%.
No.
Well, we spoke to scientist Andy Hazelton, who specializes in hurricane research and modeling at the National Weather Service, who was laid off in a very chaotic fashion. So how did you find out you were fired? When? Like, walk us through that.
Basically, all of us sort of so-called probationary employees in NOAA got the same mass email at like 3:45 p.m. on the Thursday afternoon. I think it was February 27th. Basically, it was like boilerplate language, to all of us. It was kind of funny. There were mistakes in people's emails, like my title was incorrect. We had like an hour before it was effective, and then we got locked out of our emails that night, and our bosses didn't even know. It was just a chaotic experience. And now, we have this court ruling that they've been ordered to reinstate us, but we still haven't heard anything. And most of us haven't even gotten like HR paperwork about separation and health insurance. And so it's just kind of been a mess.
Yeah, so we did see that. We saw that people were like fired and then rehired, and it seems a little bit disorganized.
This has been disruptive, not just the agency, but all of us, personally as well.
Yeah, and to the work when hurricane season starts up later this year, how will this make the public less safe?
So sort of the reliable forecasts that people have come to count on, and maybe harder to get information out as quickly. And it's just going to be a strain across the agency. And we don't want to see that because, our mission at NOAA is to protect lives and property. And that's what we want to do.
Surprised to hear about all of these layoffs at NOAA. Apparently, like they're about 20% of the workforce is going to be cut. Why do you think that NOAA was targeted by the Trump administration? We understand that it doesn't really take up that much of the national budget at all.
No, in fact, it's one of the biggest, probably most efficient in terms of, the bang for your buck, because I think it costs about 6 cents per taxpayer or per American per day to fund those, just a little bit. And really, it almost pays for itself anytime there's a hurricane. Billions of dollars are saved because people can prepare their property and get themselves out of harm's way. But also, as forecasts get better, there's fewer false alarms, so people don't have to get out of the way or evacuate or close their business if they're not going to get hit.
When you think about all of the people who are laid off and how important this work is, or do you get worried at all?
Definitely, I'm worried for our obviously my friends and colleagues that got impacted by this, but also just for the state of science and meteorology and everything. I hope we can sort of get the ship righted and move forward together as a community.
And since we spoke to Andy, we found out that he's being temporarily reinstated in paid non-duty status pending the outcome of a court case in Maryland that invalidated the firings. But the memo says that he could be terminated again if the government's appeal goes through.
So he could just be fired at any moment if that goes through. Like, it must be weird to go back to a job where your boss is actively fighting to fire you.
It's just all so messy, like the firings and the rehirings and the reasons for all of this. And then on top of that, all of these job losses are predicted to thrust DC into an economic recession.
Well, we'll add that to the list of unintended consequences.